Imagine for a moment that you're sitting at an intersection and pretty soon you hear sirens. As you look up, you watch a big red fire truck go by. You watch it go down the street and it turns after a while. Pretty soon you don't hear the sirens. Do you ever contemplate to yourself, wonder what exactly they're doing? Or how is my department formed? What are the things that firefighters do when they're not responding to calls? Well, tonight we'll talk about that a little bit and hopefully give you some figures and facts and some insight into what exactly it takes to provide the fire service for people in the United States. One of the first things that might be informative to know is that there are many different formations of fire departments across the United States. If you live in a big city, no doubt, for the most part, you just think those people are career and they spend their time at the fire station and they respond to calls. And that's their job. And while that's true in most major metropolitan areas, do you realize that over 70% of the firefighters in the United States are volunteer? Now, by saying that doesn't mean that they're not professional or they do a different job. It's just that they don't get paid to do what your career firefighters in municipal departments do. Many times volunteers respond from home when their pager goes off or when the call comes out. They don't stay at the station like you see in the movies. And they all have jobs to support themselves. A true volunteer system, or as we know it from those type of things, like I said, is they respond from home. But there's also combination departments where you have a combination of career and volunteers. Sometimes volunteers man those stations, pulling the same shifts as career folks do. And then, of course, you get into the major metropolitan areas or areas with higher tax brackets that can afford to have career firefighters. So that's just kind of a comment or a quick synopsis of what how the fire departments across the United States are made up. Funding mechanisms are a huge part of different fire departments as well. Again, while we think of major metropolitan departments that we might see on TV, some departments are tax funded through taxpayer dollars, through property taxes or sales tax or those type of things. But there are actually many smaller departments across the United States that still to this day are privately funded through donations and or bake sales or chili feeds or bingo. And it's a struggle for those organizations to maintain the level of service that they provide in many cases. So we've learned that there's volunteer and career, or there's a combination of both. We've learned that some are tax funded and some are privately funded through donations and everything. But what do firefighters do today? Well, as most common, we see them on a fire truck responding to some sort of call. Again, across the United States, there's many makeups of what fire departments do, but they can do anything from primarily response to fires to many departments today are also responding to EMS calls. Many are responding to hazmat or hazardous material calls and technical rescue calls, such as collapse rescue or rope high angle and low angle rescue or water rescue. So there's really no one particular thing that a fire department does. In fact, what is common in the industry to say is if law enforcement doesn't handle it, probably the fire department does. So where back in the day, it used to be that firefighters just responded to fires. Now they're really, truly a jack of all trades. When you think about that and think about all of the things that firefighters now respond to, there's also comes along with that is the training levels and the certification levels. Again, being career or volunteer, sometimes those levels are different, but in many cases, the reality is that they train to the same certification. So in some cases, you have volunteer departments and volunteer members who are putting in hundreds of hours of training each and every year. Their career counterparts may be doing the exact same thing as they go through that. So there's an increased training on the types of incidents they go with. There's training for motor vehicle extrication, there's training for water rescue, there's training for rope rescue, There's training for hazardous materials calls, confined space training. You name it, it goes on out there. And again, these are all things that go on behind the scenes of that fire truck that went down the roadway in front of us. The other thing the fire departments do in reality is we try to be proactive. And there's prevention sides of what we do. So in prevention, there's education, which many times your local fire department can be seen going to schools for Fire Prevention Week and education programs. They can be doing risk reduction for senior members of our communities and those type of things. Along with that goes code enforcement. Many times the firefighters are out inspecting businesses to find fire hazards or building code violations that could endanger people in case of a fire or building collapse or overcrowding, that type of thing. So really, realistically, the proverbial firefighter waiting around for a call really doesn't happen that much. Even if their career and they spend 24 hours at their station or 12 hours at the station, there's all kinds of things that they do to maintain their gear, maintain their apparatus that they respond on, train, and then do the prevention side of things as well. You know, when you talk about funding of a fire department, it really is very expensive. There's an analogy of that you don't want to buy a Band-Aid in a hospital because of the extreme expense of it. But realistically, fire department gear is the same type of thing because of the certifications they have to go along with it and the coverages and the liabilities that go along with manufacturing fire department gear. It's quite expensive. On an average, to outfit one firefighter to be able to fight an interior structure fire, you have to give them the proper PPE, which entails coats, pants, boots, helmet, gloves, Nomex hood, plus an SCBA. Well, when you compile all of that cost, it's very easily estimated that you're going to spend about $10,000, give or take a little bit, just to outfit that firefighter to do one aspect of their job. If they do wildlands fires or they do rope rescue type equipment events, that might take some additional equipment as well. And so it becomes very expensive. That fire engine that drove down the street in our illustration in the front probably costs anywhere from $300,000 to $600,000 for each one. And so it's a very expensive occupation to be in as well. So hopefully this is just a brief touch on all the things that a fire department does and all the expenses that they run into, and it helps you give a brief synopsis of the costs involved, the training that firefighters go through, and exactly all the services that they provide to a community. Often the unsung heroes, or the ones that are in the shadows, we don't usually see them until the lights and sirens are going on the fire truck. But hopefully the next time you see that truck go by or that engine go by, hopefully take some time to contemplate exactly what's going on there and all of the background stuff that happens to make it possible for those firefighters to do their job.